I is for indentation level. We'll go over here, and we're going to paste that there for the a dashed line that is indented 5. I'm going to go over to my code again, and like I said, I feel like I want this indented a little bit more extreme so I can get rid of this like visual curve that's happening, because I don't want curves, I want things to be jagged. We already know that this is kind of like the center, so if we probably bring these two together, there we go, yep, so that's perfect. Right, and then we can, I'm going into my scripts over here, I'm gonna paste that into the source code, and then we'll do that. Okay, so I have to reload those before those will work, but we'll do that at a later date because that takes a while because there's so many shortcuts. Okay, so now that we have this, we can just make a note that that what this section is here is like persisting the well, actually this is not, eventually this will be persisting the samplers and the textures. And it's not U32 put, it's called pixput, right? Pixput and pixput. And we'll say persist 1 textures and 2 texture samplers, and those are the sampler value, right? Yeah, sampler value. Now that's the thing. Did we actually set the sampler values? Because I know that they need to be the same value as the texture slots. So let's go way up here. Yeah, so it looks like, I'm gonna guess that these are still at these like trapped values, and we should probably fix that. So we know it's like, if we go back here, okay, so we have the texture slot here. I'm fairly certain that the sampler, and now you would say, well, since it's always going to be tightly coupled, you know, why did we even specify this variable if it's always going to be, you know, that? And yeah, that is a questionable design decision. But I made, you know, but at one point you gotta stop splitting hairs and just make a decision. So I made a decision. The location, that's actually kind of like its address. It's almost like a pointer or at the memory address of the value in the shader. So we want to make sure that we're setting the right one. And the texture slot. So, okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to take these values here and, right, and just make a note that these are supposed to be the same. And, you know, maybe we want to be OCD, space that out, and make a note that, you know, the sampler value equals the, you know, we could do that, right? Now we've kind of ran out of space, though. Maybe we don't need that comment. That's kind of like what we're doing literally in the code. Maybe that's overly redundant. And we can take this texture slot as well. And right, we got to make sure that, right, the order is now important, right? So if we do this in the wrong order, right, if we put this declaration up above before it's where it's set, then that would be a bad time. Okay, so there we go. That's all nicely aligned. Okay, this is when, you know, just click, make sure that they're associated with the correct memory blocks. So sampler value equals the texture slot, right? Because the samplers are tightly coupled with the textures, and the textures are tightly coupled with the actual pixel array on the CPU side. So we got this, just a lot of tight coupling. Guess that looks good to me. So now we can go back down to like the where we call pix put. That looks, oh, we were going backwards. Okay, so we can, so here we're calling pix put. These values should be set now because we just set the sampler value. Do we? Yeah, so I think that should be good. Now we're gonna get an error, right? If everything goes correctly, we should get an error because we have some unimplemented parts. But but the error should be an error that we actually programmed. And if that doesn't get tripped, then we need to do a little bit more work fixing whatever syntax errors we made, or, you know. So let's refresh this. Okay, so this tells me, so I'm going to guess that our error tripped. We didn't make a syntax error, because if we made a syntax error, I believe the whole thing would blow up. But I'm going to guess we're going to trip our specific error. Yeah, so uncaught pixput texture sampler uniform VT. So for variable, oh wait, for variable type? Okay. What the hell? That wasn't the error I was expecting, but that's nice to know that that's there. So what I think happened is, so this, it looks all correct, but I'm going to guess that when I created these, maybe the constructor, I forgot to change some things. So this is a uniform pixel type. And, oh yeah, so somewhere during my refactoring or something, I missed the variable type thing. And this was a rewrite of something else. So yeah, this variable type thing, I totally forgot about that. And that's to be assigned when we construct it, just a little thing to, you know, help us remember what type it is in the debugger, right? Because JavaScript is all kind of loosey-goosey, so if we want some type information, we're going to have to just make a variable that tells us what type it is ourselves. And we can put that one first, and then we can just put a comma right here. And it's not a uni U32, it's a unipix value, right? So the idea is that this variable name matches this, and this variable name matches the constructor name, right? So everything kind of like lines up, and oh god, you can't see that. When am I gonna stop doing that? So we added this variable type right here, and it needs to be of right, all these match, right? The constructor constructs an object of this type. When we name the variable inside the constructor, we get the same name. Its type matches its name. Like, everything needs to kind of like match, so we can kind of see those associations. And then down here, I just, you know, added another comma so that the syntax should be valid. Let's go back here. Let's see if everything is working correctly. Got a breakpoint. Not what I wanted. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. And okay, so we got this again, which that is okay. Okay, so to do. Okay, so we got our to do message. That's excellent, because that's where we actually wanted to be. So now if we look for that. I'm gonna look for that to do in the source. Hold on, let me let you see what I'm looking at. And oh god. Did I just... God damn it. So I seem to have... Oh, yeah, that's some bullshit. I accidentally... I have these motherfucking things locked so that you can't change where they are, and yet pressing the wrong hotkey, I guess, totally overrides the fact that it's supposed to be locked. Like, I'm using, like, OBS Studio to, like, lock these in position. But I guess Control-C will fuck your shit up. Okay, so there. Okay, so there. I think we're good now. Let me make sure that the other windows are okay. Yep, that looks good. Okay, that looks good. Okay, so back here. Try to remember not to press Control-C when I'm over in the code. Or when I think I'm in the code, but I actually have focus in OBS. Okay. So we're going to look for to-do. And oh boy, I have a lot more to-dos than... Okay, so here we are. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna comment out these to-dos really quick, and we expect our texture sampling problem that we've had to finally be fixed. Like, no more red and green quadrants. Like, we should see like a more of a checkered pattern. And kind of nervous. Let's just do... Oh, yes. Beautiful. Beautiful. So when we look in here, right, we can see that we have these red and green dots, which, so let's save the image really quick. It's kind of fucking annoying that I have to do this, but let's do no more WTF.png, whatever. And we're gonna show that in folder. We're gonna open that up in paint.net. And this is just so that we can, or that I can, we can, whatever, show you what it looks like without that bullshit blurring. Right, we'll actually want to see what that looks like. Hold on. So let me show you what that looks. So right, because if we zoom in, in here, right, this is not. Let me move that over there. This is what it looks like in the browser, and you'll notice that we can't really get a good idea of what's going on here, right? Because it just. We see it looks like a whole bunch of little spheres. It's even harder to... But if we go into Paint, though, and take a look at it here in Paint, what we're gonna notice is, oh yeah, there's a checker, right? Instead of having those red and green quadrants, we now have this checker pattern, because now we're actually sampling from the correct texture. And that's awesome, because we do have some little problems we're gonna need to fix now. So you notice this like little texture stretch here. So there is supposed to be hold on. You can't see that, can you? Oh well, you can kind of see it in the other monitor. Okay, so if you look at the left partition, because I can't really get it into focus otherwise, but if you look at the left partition, so the mini map of my screen, you can see this big chunk of 4 white pixels. That should only be 1 pixel, and it should be in the very bottom left, and that was for me to make sure that the sampler was not off by 1. And the reason it's off by 1 right now is because I was mucking around trying to like fix the problem, and so I kind of like totally trashed the shader code. But now that, but let's go back into the shader code and fix up some of the parts that are wrong now. So I don't know. Right now, to find that really quick, I'm going to type 512.0, and that should bring me into the shader code somewhere. Okay, so this, you see the minus 1.0? That is incorrect. We actually don't minus anything. And the reason why I keep it explicitly as minus 0 is because the formula, when you look at this formula, and when I've looked at other formulas, my intuition would be like, oh, 512, because of some of the other formulas I've been writing, that 512 is wrong, you need to minus 1 to make sure there's not an off by 1 error, right? Because the texture is 512 by 512, which means that the valid coordinates are 0 to 512. But because of the way we're operating here, because we take that tile coordinate and we add 0.5, it's just the way the math works out, is that we do not minus 1 here. This 0.5 is because of the way OpenGL works, right? The pixels are defined by their pixel centers. So we're just turning the tile coordinates into texture coordinates, and then we can sample. So right here, I'm saying, you know, if you're out of bounds of the tile coordinates, so if you're out of bounds of the texture, I'm going to like make a nice little checker pattern to make sure that you know you're out of bounds in the feedback. If I used just the normal texel fetch command, you wouldn't be able to program in like this custom behavior for out of bounds. It would just automatically wrap. And I don't like that default behavior. I want something more obnoxious, so I kind of like know what's going on. I want it to be more obviously wrong when something goes wrong. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that looks like okay. Let's refresh the browser. And okay. First of all, can we see the problem? We can't. We can still see the problem. Very weird that I can only zoom in so much, but I definitely can't. I don't know if you can see on the screen here, but this white area definitely is 2 pixels big. I can see that little black spot, which is half the size. I can also see this border. It looks a little bit stretched. So with all that feedback, I'm going to refresh. And no dice. Still broken? Okay, so I'm going to refresh again. Huh. That's weird. Okay, well I know I mucked around in here a lot, so I'm gonna go back to the code, and I know that I have messed up so much of this, so we can look around and see what else might be messed up. Okay, so we take the frag chord, and we're minusing 0.5 to turn that frag chord into more of a tile coordinate. Maybe for whatever reason that is improper. But I highly doubt it, right? Because we do the texel fetch. Oh, hold on. If we minus 0.5, like why? Why do we need minus 0.5, right? Because if we're flooring this, and also if we're going to turn it to integer, I don't know. I don't think this should have any effect at all. You know, but let's just take a look. And, I mean, oh, okay, yeah, that was exactly... Huh. Okay, I have to think about why that is. Like, it's like, this is a case of it works, but I don't know why. So, let me think. Why did that work? So we floor this. Oh, because we floored it, right? And if we floored it, then we already took off the 0.5. So I think that while this gets the correct result, this isn't very readable. What we really want is GL frag chord, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna minus 0.5 because of that pixel center deal, and that's more readable than flooring it. Now, converting to integer, I believe, automatically truncates the value, but the values should always be like 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, etc. But I feel like this is much more readable. Let's go take a look up here. Let's refresh. Okay, so we're still getting the same thing, and this is much more readable. And yeah, there's a lot of things I want to do here to clean this up, but this is good enough for now. Let's look at the Texel fetch function again, and let's intentionally mess it up to make sure that this is correct. I'm pretty damn sure this is correct, but let's mess it up and put the 1 back here and go back to the output, and the output looks pretty correct, right? There's not even that division line in the middle anymore. And if we refresh, what do we get? Oh, hey, we get that little artifact. See, we got 2 artifacts right in the middle now, right? Because it's off by 1. And so the problem is very subtle. And if you weren't using a very uniform... If you weren't using a debug texture, you might not even notice this. I don't know. I think, maybe you would, but it would be much more subtle if we weren't using a debug texture. Okay, so we are absolutely sure that the formula is correct, and it's not even off by 1, right? 90% of the time is... What is it? 10% of the time Okay, so for making an algorithm, it's like 10% of the time is fleshing out the basic algorithm and getting it working, and then like the other 90% is just like trying to make sure that nothing is off by 1, because those little considerations are just very important. Actually, one more thing I want to do. So this memory type is always going to be 512, but I feel like I want to use the feature of... I don't want to hard code these values. And I know I have... There's a command... What was it? It's called like texture size, and I probably have it written somewhere in here. Where I may have obliterated it when I was... so f texture size. Okay, so I may have obliterated it when I was trying to find the problem. I'd like... But let's go over to my notes. I think I may have made a note of it. So texture size, and do not use texture size, doesn't exist in WebGL 2, so that could be a lie. We're gonna try, because I didn't know what the hell was going wrong with my shader, and I'm like, okay, maybe these features don't exist. And I was looking at bug reports and things, but it might actually exist. So what we're gonna do is, I do not know what type texture size would be. Like, is it a float or is it an integer? You would think that it would be an integer, but because most of the calculations with textures use floating point, it might return floating point values for convenience. So we'll try vec2, and we'll say we don't really want texture size. Don't we have like texture span or I'm gonna make a note. So, because I feel like I have. Oh no, it's okay, so I think I should call for consistency. Let me think. Well, I can either call it this or I can call it this, but I gotta decide which one I want to choose. So PIX for pixels usually is the name. So these are like the same name, but this would be, I'm gonna say that this would be on the GPU and this is the CPU, or sorry, on the GPU side / VRAM, and then this is on the CPU side. But since we're in the shader code, we're on the GPU side, so we should probably use this variable and just disallow the use of this variable, because we already have a thing called pixel, span, and we have width and we have height, and then this is, but this is specifically a container that contains both the width and the height. So yeah, let's do it like that, and then we'll say texture size and the name of the texture. And we're not going to use the variable yet because I'm not even sure if this syntax is correct, because that might be the wrong type. We're just going to try to run the shader, run the project again, and see if it crashes. And it crashes, so let's see what we screwed up. Texture size, no matching overload function found. Cannot convert const medium p to high p component vector float. Huh. So that's weird, because I would have thought that. So they're both float in here, but it's saying that it can't convert. Oh, maybe texture size is always. Maybe texture size is always like texture size is for square textures, and so therefore there would only be one dimension. That could be a thing. We could try, just in case, maybe there's like a different overload, like if we do like IVEC2. And if there's not, then, so just I made this into IVEC2. We'll try that, and if that doesn't work, we're just not going to use texture size. We'll make a comment, and we'll work around that instead. Yeah, so this is no good. This is no good as far as I'm concerned. Comment that out. Okay, so I commented out the texture size thing, and I'll just make a note in the source code for now that this that it's 512 by 512, right? And that's probably not going to change in the project at all ever, but I don't like encoding, magic numbers like this. But we can make a note. This is right, and this is. That's the width, that's the height. And we're going to clean up the shader later. I'm going to stop recording because I'm not sure if the timer running right now, if I had reset that when I started recording, or if I went over my time and then kept on going. So I'm going to stop recording and start another video.